Good afternoon, everybody. Here with Katie Dykes, Commissioner of DEEP, talk a little bit about the outage and how we're getting back on our feet. Josh Jabal is here. I'll give you the latest on COVID. My friend Ben Blake can give you from the ground level in Milford in a few minutes. Just to start off, I don't know what happened to the lazy, hazy, crazy days this summer. They're certainly not lazy, maybe hazy, and certainly crazy. I can tell you we just got out of the meeting with Vice President Pence and the COVID task force. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, was there, and they wanted to follow up from the President's executive orders that he announced a couple nights ago that created a little bit of confusion, I think. And they just said, look, we're just trying to get money out to people sooner, but we really want to reach a deal between the Senate and the House. And just to give you some insights that I think they wanted us to make public. Number one, from the White House's point of view, and probably the Republican Senate, education is first and foremost, over $100 billion. They really want to make sure that we do everything we can to get our schools back safely. And I think there's some general consensus between Republicans and Democrats there if they can go forward. Obviously, a bit more of a dispute about state and local aid. They put on the table $150 billion. This is the Republican plan. The Democrats were looking for a lot more money, just given the nature of the revenue shortfall that the state has hit and towns like Milford have hit. And we'll see whether there's any more room for negotiation there. Other priorities from the White House, they said it would be child care, food, SNAP program, vaccinations, broadband. So those are all the items they have on the table to see if we can reach some sort of a compromise going forward. Not enough, but it's a starting point. But the main message they wanted to give us was, whatever you heard from the executive orders, more importantly, we're trying to reach a real deal. And finally, when it comes to unemployment compensation, there was some confusion there. It looks very good that the feds will give us at least a $300 a week true-up, maybe up to $400. The guidance is going to come out on that very soon, like in the next 24 hours. One of the things they heard from the governors is, look, the numbers are really important, but also the timing and the certainty, so we can count on what we need to do going forward. Enough on that if you have any other questions. Let's talk about the outage for 1 second. This is a kind of a complicated chart that comes out of Eversource, I think in particular, the outages they have there. What you should know is, and here we are in day 6, Eversource has got still 94,000 people without service, about 7% of their population. And UI, United Illuminating, has less than 1% of their people. So the good news is we've got 93% of the people back with power. It took 6 days, and obviously if you're without power now, you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. This gives you an idea of some of the other towns that still have more than 30% without power. Sharon, Sherman, Weston has been hit hard, Bethel, Woodbury, Ridgefield. Ridgefield, I've heard from a lot. Newtown, just there. Cornwall, Wilton, Reading, Harwinton. Probably the town that has the most number of outages still is Danbury. Obviously, they've gotten a lot done in the last 24 hours, a lot done which should have been done 3 days ago. But that's where we are right now. What can you do about this? Obviously, there's a lot of talk. Max, next slide. A lot of talk, fire the management and fines and rebates and refunds. And look, I think we'll take care of all that and see how things transpire. But I believe we heard all the same things after the last big outage back in 10 and 11. And we've had, I think we're on our 4th CEO of Eversource since then as well. So I've been talking to Katie Dykes about what we can do to deal with the systemic problems we have in terms of the reliability of our grid, and what we can do to make some real long-term changes that make sure our incentives are aligned when it goes forward. And one of the things Katie and I are looking at and hopefully PURA, our regulatory body, is going to be tasked as part of their docket, is to change the nature of the regulation. Right now, it's called rate of return regulation, which is sort of whatever you spend, we'll give you another 9% is rate of return on what you got, and we'll live to fight another day. And that makes no sense to me. That means we're giving you a rate of return on the good things you do, bad things we do. There's no incentives there for performance. So I am going to be really pushing hard to get performance-based regulation, performance-based rate of return going forward. And in particular, when it comes to reliability and resilience. You know, it seems to me that if you do really well, you deserve a better rate of return. And if you don't perform, if you leave, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people without service for days on end, now we're coming up to a week, there should be penalties to pay. And one of the ways that we can influence that is through the rate of return analysis. So that's what Katie and I are going to focus on in a serious way to make sure our interests are aligned, that a utility has a real incentive to harden their system, a real incentive to make sure you have the remote status monitoring, a real insistence that you get the liaisons and you keep people fully informed every step of the way. And that said, you get rewarded when you do well and you get penalized when you don't do well. So we'll let all the other talk go on, but I think this is the type of performance-based rate of return regulation that makes all the sense in the world. No more, bingo, whatever you did, here's 9% over and above it. That's not the way your world works. It's not the way my world has worked. It's not the way it's going to work right any longer when it comes to what we got to do with our utilities. Obviously, for me, reliability and resilience is number one, given where we've been for the last week. But affordability, ways that they can provide a better service at less cost, I'd like to see some return for a utility for doing that. Customer satisfaction, that in terms of communication, telling people what's going on, how we can incent people to do a better job there. And finally, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to how we can make our grid more friendly in terms of renewable energy sources. This is what Katie and Marissa, who runs PURA, looking at other states, looking around the country, seeing how we can be a lot more proactive when it comes to performance-based regulation. Let's see. With that, just to change course one more time, COVID. It has been a busy August. This is a 3-day summary. I think it's the news is what you can see. We've done a lot of tests, 38,000 tests over the last 3 days. Fatalities, about 1 per day. Hospitalizations, pretty flat. Positive cases, 247. Again, good news. I think you'll find that's 0.6% of 1%. So that is less than 1%. That's amazing. For the last week, it's 0.7%. So with all what you see going on, when you see Rhode Island has got 6%, when we've got thousands of contractors coming in from out of state to fix electrical outages, when you hear about these parties going on, thankfully, we're still at less than 1%, which is why if we can't get ourselves slowly back to work and back to school in a safe way, nobody will be able to do that. We're about tied with Vermont. Maine, damn it, is at 0.5%, so they got northern Maine. That gives them a bit of an advantage, but I'm proud of Connecticut. We're still doing very well on that front. Let's see, the next chart is, we're not taking our eye off the ball. And we're going to continue to be strict because that's what's got us as far as we have and given us the good numbers we've gotten, allowing us to slowly get back to a new normal. And number one is we're going to be stepping up enforcement on those large private parties. And, what that means is, look, you got 25 people inside, you got 100 people outside. You have the same rules as we do in for example, our stores. I want that mask on. I want to make sure you've got the distancing, and we're going to try and hold people accountable there. Fines and closures for businesses violating the rules. Again, we've been urging people. They've been doing generally a very good job. We've got self-policing. We've got people calling in and going to our hotline, telling us about places that are a problem. You know, I was very interested to see that down in Bridgeport, there are a number of bars masquerading as restaurants, and they were having big parties in there. And Bridgeport, with local enforcement, stepped up and shut them down and took away their license. So this be a warning to people that we are taking this seriously, and local regulation and local enforcement is the best, and I salute what they did in Bridgeport. We have a lot of people who say, hey, I don't wear a mask in this store because I have a medical condition. Well, I think people are beginning to abuse that privilege, so from here on out, just bring your doctor's permission with you when you aren't wearing that mask and you're in that store, you're in that private area, because that's what the rules are. And finally, for the first time, we have just issued fines due to travel advisory violations. You know, people have been always saying, what are you going to do? What happens? And I said, look, I think overwhelmingly the number of people flying into our state from COVID-infected areas is way down. I think people are self-policing and self-regulating, but no, not all are. And we wanted to send a message loud and clear. So we have two folks who flew back to Connecticut, one from Louisiana, one from Florida. Neither of them filled out the form. They're paying a $1,000 fine. One of them didn't fill out the form and refused to quarantine. And we were noticed by a workmate of that person, and they're paying an additional $1,000 for violating the quarantine. Look, I hate to do it, but we're going to be serious, show people we're serious about this. And to date, it's made a difference, and I hope we can continue to make a difference. Overwhelmingly, people are doing the right thing. For those few of you who aren't, please be on notice. I think with that, well, I guess tomorrow is primary day. I'll just throw that in at this point. It's the primary day. I was asked by Secretary of State Denise Merrill to extend the period of time that your ballot can be mailed in, so it has to be postmarked by tomorrow, but it'll have another 48 hours to come in. Any way you can that you don't feel safe going to the ballot box, don't feel encumbered, and please mail it in. You've got another day to do that right, do that safely. This is our dress rehearsal to get this primary done right. Overwhelmingly, you've told us people want to vote by mail. Some of the stumbling blocks they've had is just the sheer number of people that have done that, and that's why we're giving you an extra couple days, especially given what's happened with this electrical storm. We need a little bit of extra time. You know, with that, Katie here on what we're doing in terms of regulation, what we're doing in terms of the outages, Josh, all-purpose hitter, and we've got the mayor of Milford here to tell you from the ground level up what he's seen going on. Over to you, Max.
NBC Connecticut.
Related to the electrical.
Outages, we had more trees down. It was and still is a huge recovery. We're going to take days and weeks and months to get back to normal. We really do appreciate the resources that the state has brought down, but we were a little bit upset with some of the utility delay, the fact that the communication from our utility companies is not where it should be. The governor just mentioned that we, after each storm, have a lessons learned, and it seems like some of the same lessons that we learned after Storm Sandy, Storm Irene, continue on.
Obviously, we're improvising here. Anyone else have questions for Mayor Ben Blake of Milford, who's doing a fine job of standing in?
Next.
I'll throw in a question for the mayor. This is Suzanne from News 12.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi. Curious, we had a lot of people who, instead of commuting, were working at home. It was sort of an improvised system. And then all of a sudden we have the storm issues. Have you seen more people returning to their offices, or how have they been dealing with that situation?
Well, there's really two issues. One, obviously, everybody has power outage issues either with UI or Eversource, depending what type of community you are. Milford's a UI community. The other issue is communications infrastructure. Altice has been terrible. Our Optimum service has gone down tenfold, and people that were remote working, virtual working, I guess even the governor's office, they're having trouble communicating with some of the online resources that we have. So people are doing what they can to continue on with making sure that they're able to work. I do know that each individual employer is a little bit different in terms of what is allowable, but I do know that there have been communications issues.
Hey, thank you, Ben, and we are back. Good cameo, appreciate it.
And we also have
And Jim Marpy's here. Hey, Jim.
Hey.
Go ahead.
I guess first up in Markey, do you want to make any comments regarding what the situation has been like down in your neck of the woods over the past week?
Yeah, I was very pleased to be talking with or hearing Mayor Blake's report. Unfortunately, here in Westport, the story is a little worse, I'm afraid. We at our peak, we had 97% of our of Eversource's customers without power. I guess I'm pleased to say that we're down to 28% now. But frankly, I've got a lot of, as you might imagine, upset and angry residents who want to know when and how soon, and obviously that their power will be turned back on. The challenge that we face here, frankly, in dealing with Eversource has been what I would describe as communication and coordination. The information that we've received is often not as good and up to date as we would like it to be, so that we can coordinate with the Eversource resources to make sure that we get the power back. By the way, I want to thank Governor Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bisowitz for coming down on Friday to Westport and taking time to visit with us and explain what they're up to and what the state is up to, and I appreciate the help that the state has been giving to us. I've been in regular touch, and my people have been in regular touch with the state as well. So thank you very much for that support. What I want to say is what Eversource, I think, needs to work on is how they collect their own information. My suspicion is they themselves are having trouble collecting information internally and then turning around and sharing that so we can share it as appropriate with our residents. That said, because of the heat today, we've opened a cooling station for our seniors. We're gradually getting back to kind of normal operations, but I think when this is all said and done, we need to sit down with Eversource and work very, very hard to figure out how to prevent this from happening again. Again, the struggle with me is I don't know if there are 2 crews in town, 20 crews, or 200. they're wherever they are, but we don't know where they are. And early on, we weren't getting the make safe crews that we needed in order to clear roads and keep people physically safe. Governor, I know you had the opportunity to visit one of our worst blockage areas, and thankfully we have on retainer a retired Eversource coordinator technician to help us through this. But you saw how challenging that was, and we have areas all over town like that that we've cleared all the pathways so we can at least get to everyone. But it'll be a while before the cleanup takes place.
Took Susan and I down a street where there was a twister probably up to 100 miles an hour snapping those 100-year-old oaks like old matchsticks. That was just extraordinary, the damage we saw there, Jim.
We'll move along. We'll go first to News 8.
Good afternoon, everyone. Couple of things. First off, Governor, one of the byproducts of the storm, certainly people trying to get to areas to stay cool, work computers, maybe charge their phones and stuff, and that kind of gathering, the early numbers may not show it, but are you concerned maybe in the coming days that there might be a bit of a spike because of so many people getting probably too close together, almost out of necessity, and maybe having their guard down?
I was concerned at Memorial Day, concerned by a George Floyd protest, concerned by the fact that a lot of people may be in shelter right now. I think Connecticut's getting pretty experienced in how to balance these different issues, and I think they're being very careful.
Also, one of our viewers asked about with Rhode Island, who I believe is still on the travel advisory, and their numbers have been going down. People looking to maybe move people into school there or to get relief from their power outages here. Anything regarding Rhode Island in the coming days?
Yeah, Rhode Island, we love you. Stay home. I say the same thing to Connecticut. They have a much higher infection rate than we do. You know, they got some bars and some things going on there, so I think it really makes all the sense in the world to stay close to home.
Fox 61.
Hi, this is Brian Bidlake with Fox 61. My first question is to the governor. Governor, do you agree with officials like State Representative John Frey, who's calling for the legislature to dismantle Eversource, saying it's grown too big, quote, to effectively handle large-scale responses and restoration? Do you agree that the state should buy out or dismantle Eversource at this point?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means, but that's why we're going to take a hard look through this investigative process at Eversource, how they responded, how we can put in place incentives to make sure this doesn't ever happen again. Whether having 10 little electric utilities rather than Eversource is something that is going to require a lot more study.
And one more question, moving away from the Eversource dilemma, we are hearing from multiple people that the state may be looking to transfer our fall football sports to springtime. Have you heard anything about that at this point?
I've certainly heard a lot of discussion about that, but I don't think there's any plans at this point. Right now, you know, the league is saying football is sort of non-contact practice for now, but make a firmer determination probably in the next few weeks when it comes to high school football. I will say intuitively to me, playing baseball now where it's easier to social distance and football later where it's tougher to social distance makes some sense, but I'm going to let the experts take the lead there.
Thank you.
News 12 Connecticut.
I realize there's a lot going on besides this primary, but why is it important that people not get distracted from it? Why is it important that they do participate, and what are you doing to hopefully help people participate despite COVID and the storm?
Yeah, I want this primary to take place. It was supposed to be in June, then it was going to be in July, now it's tomorrow. There are a number of contested local races that make a big difference. There's At the presidential level, they're not as contested, let's say, right now, it seems. But it's really important that people, A, be able to vote and be able to vote safely. And especially if you're over 65, especially if you have some sort of a pre-existing condition. We wanted to make sure you could vote remotely. That means by absentee ballot. So we tried to do everything we could to make that as easy as possible for you to vote, sent out the applications early. Things got slowed up a little bit. That's why we're giving a little bit of extra time and make sure we really have it right in November.
If any of the local officials would like to follow up on how you're dealing with all of these situations together.
Who, me personally?
Well, in Westport or Milford, how they're handling the combination of the storm and COVID and the election.
Well, it's all hands on deck. Our city employees, from Public Works to Emergency Management, have done a great job with the storm response and the recovery. At the city clerk's office and the registrar of voters office, they are doing everything to make sure that tomorrow's primary is safe, it's secure. I can't tell you how great a job our local folks are doing.
Jim?
First Selectman Markey, please unmute.
They will come back to you. Max?
All right. NBC Connecticut.
Hi, Governor. Matt Olson with NBC Connecticut. Just real fast about the unemployment benefit. Over the weekend, you had raised some concerns if the state was going to have to share some of the cost for the supplemental. Do you have any update on that? Do you still have those concerns?
Yeah, that would have cost us hundreds of millions of dollars, say $500 million between now and the end of the year. So that seemed prohibitive to me. At this point, the White House is still sort of making up their mind. Department of Labor down in Washington is going to give us guidance. It really looks like they're going to give us at least $300 weekly true up in unemployment and maybe another $100 that they reimburse back to us. They got to figure this out pretty soon, and hopefully we're going to hear that tomorrow.
I know just in terms of COVID, you have tried to implement rules statewide, but several communities that have a college or other institution in their community are asking for exceptions to lower the restrictions in terms of gatherings, the number of people that are going to be allowed. Are you okay with that? Are you going to be giving them the okay to go ahead with that?
We have tried to do things statewide. As you know, when it comes to schools, each situation is a little bit particular, so we're allowing them to make the call between the mix of in-person classroom and hybrid. Do you want to talk about the restrictions for the college towns?
Yeah, no, we're in receipt of the letter and the request, and we certainly appreciate the interest in the partnership from those municipalities and doing everything we possibly can to try to keep the lid on COVID as we have it now. It's something that we're evaluating with our teams. No decision made at this point, but we are partnering with all those college towns to make sure we're doing everything possible to contain COVID as students come back to school in the coming weeks.
And just finally, back on July 14th, Eversource had warned about just a huge number of dead and hazardous roadside trees and the concern about the electrical system that many towns just are overwhelmed with the number of removal of the trees that they have to handle. Is this something the state needs to get involved with in terms of removing all these trees that could help prevent what we saw last week?
Surely on our roads, we're very aggressive about tree trimming because I hear about it from everybody who loves the trees. Jim, could you hear that question as regards tree trimming?
Yes, I did. I apologize for, I'm not as familiar with this particular technology as I am with Zoom. The reality is we've been fairly aggressive in our tree trimming activity. We have a great tree warden here in town who's really on top of the game, and we're working with him to make sure that we're doing the trimming that's necessary. You know, as you saw the other day, Governor, the trees that were felled were healthy trees in many cases, and in one case we think one of the trees that fell in Longshore Park was maybe 200 years old. and in good shape, not hollowed out. So the problem, at least for us, I don't think was that situation. That said, it is a very real one, and at least our tree warden has worked hard to make sure that on our public rights of way we're removing those trees and working with Eversource to get those away from the power lines as well.
Katie, anything else?
Sure. Well, Governor, I know that trees impacting power lines is one of the major drivers of outages for both of our utilities. And this is one of those things that was a wake-up call in the 2011 and 2012 when we had those major storms. And there's been a lot of focus on getting the utilities authorized and spending more dollars and ramping up their programs around vegetation management, is what you call it in the business, but ensuring that they're doing more of that tree trimming and working closely with tree wardens and municipal officials on those notification processes. And that's one of the things that we have to look at, is how have those dollars been spent? Do they continue to be effective? And is our utility leadership really motivated to put those dollars to work in the most effective and efficient ways? Because these are expensive programs. At the same time, I think, the situation in Westport really highlights this. We're dealing with much more frequent and intense storms. That we saw those very severe storms occurring in 2011 and 2012. The recurrence of that this season. There are between 21 and 25 more named tropical storms out there in the Atlantic right now. We're still early in the season. The impacts of climate change are also affecting our forests in terms of more invasive species and more drought. And so that's why we need to have our utility companies really motivated and laser focused on how to manage all of those different impacts of climate change, to put our ratepayer dollars at work, to prepare and have a more resilient grid into this future that we're facing.
Channel 3 Eyewitness News. WTIC 1080 News.
Hi, Mr. Governor, something a little bit new here. Senator Blumenthal in a statement says he met with Jim Judge from Eversource, says there's no commitment from the company to pay back customers, and the senator's still calling for the removal of Eversource's senior leadership team, which I assume would include the CEO. Where do you stand on all that? There's several leaders now calling for the resignation of Jim Judge as CEO of Eversource.
If I were Eversource, I'd go beyond the call of duty when it comes to how we can try and make good for the people who have been hit hard on this. That would be refunds. That would be helping out with people who have had spoiled food and the such. As regards Jim Judge and the CEO, I think I referred before to the fact that, every 2 or 3 years there's no new CEO and it's the same old story, which is why I'm really focusing like a laser beam on a performance-based regulation, performance-based rate of return, ways that I can hold whoever the CEO is accountable to make sure they get paid for really good performance, but not for bad performance.
And the other update is the football committee at the State High School Association voted to move football this spring. That was today. And now the Board of Control would have to approve that move. So that's the update there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I hadn't heard that, as you can tell from the last answer, but it makes good sense to me.
The Associated Press.
Thanks, Max. Governor, it looks like the congressional talks over another coronavirus relief package have failed, and that means at this point we're not going to see any money coming to the states. What does that mean for Connecticut, for our budget, for schools, for the elections even?
Well, Sue, as I alluded to at the start, the message from Vice President Pence and Secretary Mnuchin and their team is, look, the EO is not the way they want to go. They want to get everybody back to the table and reach an agreement. They think they have broad agreement on education. They have some agreement when it comes to state and local, which is more than I had heard from them before. And so there's something to build off of there. That said, we put in place a reopening strategy for our schools. We fully funded it out of the money we've got right now, $260+ million. So I didn't want anybody to hesitate and wait and see what's going to happen in Washington, because that can sometimes be a waiting game.
And I wondered too, do you have any more details, and maybe this is coming out already, but regarding those people that were fined, when did those incidents happen? Do you have any more detail of, who they may be, where they're from, where they were coming from?
You got that, Josh?
Yeah, the incidents occurred a couple weeks ago. As the governor mentioned, one person had traveled from Florida, one person had traveled from Louisiana. One is a resident of Hartford County, another from Windham County. But look, the main point here is that, as the governor mentioned when we put this travel advisory in effect, this is for real. We need people to follow these rules. We need people to comply. This is one of the riskiest areas for the state of Connecticut right now, is people traveling into this state bringing the virus with them. And so the message people need to understand is that there's more investigations going on. We need you to fill out the form. If you need to quarantine, then we expect you to do that, and if not, there will be consequences.
And I have one other quickie. I've heard from some parents who are upset that their school districts are unwilling to reopen more. They feel like the hybrid is not enough time to be in the classroom. What kind of recourse do they have? Because really it's up to their districts, right?
Yeah, we told the districts, I want an in-school option, whether it's full-time or part-time. I think it was really important. So that we were strict on. Then we left it up to the superintendents to decide whether they could have full-time. I mean, most of our schools are going to be full-time, at least K through 5, because that's an age group that makes really the most sense. And I really don't like the idea of young people being in school maybe 2 or 3 days, and then in a daycare for 2 or 3 days. Then they have twice as many people they can potentially come into exposure to. So that makes the most sense to me. So I'd urge those parents that want more in-classroom opportunity to weigh in. I think now's the time to be calling your superintendent and say how important it is to you.
Thanks a lot.
The Waterbury Republican American. CT News Junkie.
Thanks, Max. Governor, I wanted to ask you about the executive order that you just signed regarding Connecticut's absentee ballots, and if they are postmarked by August 12th, that even if they come in days later, they will still count in this election?
Yeah, that was a response from Secretary of State Merrill. We got that letter from her today. Didn't want to have anybody disenfranchised due to difficulties related to the electric outage.
And so will this apply to the November election, or is this just for the primary?
It's just for the primary. It's just for this particular circumstance. I want people get their absentee ballots early, get them back on time. I want on election day, it's going to be a pretty busy Tuesday in November. I want us to be able to count the ballots on time and see who the next president of the United States is.
And also, what is it going to take to get PURA to go from the rate of return review to a performance review? Do you need legislation for that?
I sure hope not.
I believe that PURA already has within its organic authority the ability to implement performance-based approaches. And in fact, just in recently, PURA has opened grid modernization dockets to look at how to strengthen metrics around responding to storms and emergencies, as well as other important outcomes, and then also to investigate establishing those incentives around how the utilities are earning based on meeting those metrics and outcomes. So I think what the governor is calling on here is for PURA to expand and accelerate the leadership that it's been providing in making a shift, ultimately, I hope, to a much more accountable structure for how we compensate our utilities.
Thank you.
Hearst, Connecticut Media.
Hi, Governor. For you and the municipal leaders that are on the line, we've talked a lot about the primary, but how is it looking from your view? Are we, as a state, prepared for tomorrow?
Well, maybe I'll let the mayors talk about that first in terms of preparation for the primary tomorrow. What are you hearing from your registrars?
This is Jim Marby. In Westport, we're really well prepared. We've been preparing for this election for some months and focusing on it. We've consolidated our polling places into one location with the permission of the Secretary of State. And that's that's our middle school, air conditioned, and we've established all the COVID distancing guidelines. Our election workers will be appropriately guarded, facial coverings and the things they need to protect themselves. So I'm optimistic that we'll get a good turnout. But most importantly, we've had a great response to the mail-in voting. We have, as I was coming into town hall after being out at a meeting this afternoon, our town clerk, Patty Strauss, was emptying the drop-in the vote box, and I was astounded at how many envelopes there were there. So that the mail-in voting, I think, is a great idea, and a lot of Westporters have taken us up on that activity.
I'd just like to echo what Jim said. The drop-off boxes for absentee ballots, I think that's something that's here to stay. I think it's very well received, as is the mail-in system that they implemented this year, where everybody that was a party voter got an opportunity to get a mail-in certified ballot application. So those are two things that I think were very well received, but our local folks, our registrar voter, our city clerk, Karen Fortunati, they really have been stepping up and going above and beyond under these circumstances where, there are health issues and storm issues and everything else that is being thrown at them, and they're continuing to work very hard.
They said it better than I can. Max?
Okay. And Governor, I had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm sorry if you already addressed this. But regarding the president's executive order for federal unemployment that would require states to pay 25%, can Connecticut even do that?
Yeah, we can do it, but I'd be taking money from schools, I'd be taking money from testing, so it's not something that I can do. I don't think we're going to have to. The information we're beginning to get is that the White House is recalibrating that a little bit, and they will not make us, they'll reimburse us for our $100 contribution to that $400 true-up. So seeing is believing. We're going to find out by tomorrow.
Okay. And regarding the enhanced enforcement, are you relying on the general public to make reports, or are you asking officers to enforce those things?
I think all the above. When you land at Bradley Airport, somebody from DPH is there. They tell you, here's the form. I hope you filled it out. It's a requirement. That's a first line of defense. We are getting calls in from people who are really concerned whether we're paying attention to the quarantining or not. Those are how we got our two tips regarding the first two fines we had to address.
Yeah, and we've provided a significant amount of authority to local leaders, our local chief elected officials, public health departments, police departments to enforce violations of the safe reopening guidelines and other policies around mask compliance and that have been established through the executive orders. So there's a lot of people who have the ability to help us enforce this. And at the end of the day, as the governor said many times, it ultimately comes down to all of us in Connecticut as citizens to make sure we're doing the right thing.
The Hartford Current.
Hey, Governor, this is Emily Brindley from The Current. I have a clarification question on the travel advisory fines that were issued. It sounds like one of the people was fined for not filling out the health form, and the other person was perhaps fined twice for not filling out the health form and for not self-quarantining. Is that accurate?
I think that's about right.
Okay, thank you. And then I also wanted to ask about the spike in cases in Bridgeport right now. So that part of the state last week had more than twice as many cases as any other municipality. Do you have any idea how that outbreak began, and do you have concerns about a potential spike in a major city like Bridgeport?
Well, I'll start. I mean, we mentioned the fact that Bridgeport had to close down several quote-unquote restaurant bars, which were really bars parading as restaurants. I really was glad they did that. That sent a signal. There may have been dozens, hundreds of people there, and that's just how you get a flare-up again. Do you know more about that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Emily. You know, those cases where Bridgeport had the most cases by far in the state last week, local health department hasn't tied those all together into the same cluster, but really what they were pointing to was a number of large events going late into the night, younger people partying in violation of a number of the rules and executive orders in place. And so we applaud the team there, the local health department, for shutting down those establishments and making it clear that behavior is unacceptable.
And does that give you any concern about school reopenings or college reopenings?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, colleges are going to have to really be strict. We're being strict with the colleges, first of all. When you come in from an infected state, you test before you get on that plane. You test once you get to, you know, UConn or Trinity or CCSU. You know, at that point, you should quarantine. You are quarantining for a couple of weeks. So we are making darn sure that we're doing everything we can, but it only works if people follow the rules. That's why we had the question about maybe limiting the size of gatherings and the such at these colleges, at least to start off, to make sure there's no temptation to go party.
Thank you.
The Connecticut Mirror.
Josh DeBall, you said the fines were related to an incident several weeks ago. When were the fines imposed? I assume they were recent.
Yeah, they were issued today.
Okay. And who issued them?
Department of Public Health.
And in both these cases, were they results of tips, or were there follow-up based on passenger lists and not having reports for everybody who came in on those manifests?
The former. So these were based on tips that were sent in. Team at the Department of Public Health is following up on those tips, doing investigations, and once the investigation is substantiated, fines are issued.
Is there any follow-up on the documents that are available at the airport to DPH?
Those are helpful reference, particularly if there's a contact tracing need or if we need to cross-reference those with other referrals or tips that come in. So, you know, we're now at over 20,000 forms that have been submitted. I think we're going up about 1,000 a day in those travel forms. So there's a significant amount of data there that we can call on if we need it.
Were there any cases connected to the person who did not self-quarantine?
Not identified at this point.
How about the person, him or herself?
Don't believe so.
Okay. And then just one quick one for Katie Dykes. Katie, there's a lot of obviously debate over what the utilities should have prepared for, and that will take some time. But on the narrow question of, as Mr. Murphy referred to it, communication and coordination, do you have any thoughts as to why there was that failure? This is something that came up in the two-storm panel 10 years ago almost. You know, why is this still a failing of Eversource?
Well, you know, communication, it's not like a piece of hardware out on your system. It's not like a tree that you trimmed. You know, it's something that you have to prioritize and practice effectively and be dedicated to from the leadership on down. And I think that, you know, as through this time period, we've reviewed a lot of the emergency response plans, metrics that have been developed in 2012 and that have been looked at again very recently by Pura. There's good work that's been done to identify down to what kind of form or content the communication should include, how frequently it should occur during the day, how many, you know, what the ratio should be of utility liaisons to each town that they're covering. But if you have listened to the calls that the governor has convened with municipal leaders over the past week, that's not, it sounds like none of that, you know, it doesn't sound like that's what's been followed. And so I think that's the key question now in this after-action review and the investigation that Pura will do is to see what were the plans, what was followed, and how do we promote, but ultimately, to the governor's point, how do we promote a culture where that kind of practice matters and where it's going to be effective for the next emergency. And so finding ways to really change the incentive structure, I think, may help us to finally get to a place where the plans and the forms and the metrics are going to really matter and deliver on better information for municipal leaders, for customers, for businesses, for the people of Connecticut.
Thank you. Looked like Mr. Murphy was dying to say something there. No? Okay, I thought I saw him raise his hand.
I'm sorry, did you have a question for me? I missed.
Sorry, I thought I saw you indicate you wanted to chime in.
Hey, Paz, I'll chime in, though. What we're saying is, when it comes to utilities in general, there's got to be a cost and a benefit to performance or lack of performance. And right now, there's not. Right now, you get your 9.2% regardless. Maybe a utility gets a black eye if they're a little slow, but they can live through that and we'll forget about it tomorrow. That's not the way we're doing it anymore. There's going to be a cost for bad performance, and there's going to be a benefit for good performance. That's what performance-based regulation is all about. It really is going to be a sea change, and if this can't make a difference, I don't know what can.
Thank you all.
Connecticut Public Media. Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
I think that's about it. Let me just say to two of my favorite mayors, Jim and Ben, you make our lives a lot easier because of all what we've had to do together, right? Everybody's saying, how about this first absentee ballot primary we got tomorrow, right on the tail end of 50% of our state being knocked out of electricity, by the way, in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And I got to tell you, we couldn't do it without folks like you with your ear to the ground and holding our friends in the utilities accountable where they got to be held accountable. And by the way, you also got to figure out how to open up schools the next few weeks. Have a great August.